You first, Chae. Tell me your thoughts on this movie. What do you want to talk about first?
Honestly, I fucking love this movie.
But why?
It's because there's so much left to the imagination. It's almost a fairy tale.
Yeah.
And I know not a lot of this is intentional, but they put a lot of really strange little details in the background and in the foreground and just fucking everywhere that you can kind of run off with it. Like, I've got my own theories on exactly how old Beetlejuice actually is. I think he died in the 1960s, the early 60s.
Yeah, I can see that. I would
like,
go back to maybe a little bit of the 50s, but yeah, probably like late 50s, early 60s.
Yeah, late 50s, early 60s, especially based off of the costumes and the fact that he has like 6 or 7 watches on his hands most of the time. It's very obvious that he was a huckster and anything that he's saying is lying.
Yeah, he has kind of like an Archie Bunker feel to him at times.
I don't know who that is.
God damn it.
I don't know anything other than horror.
Got it. Moving on.
But yeah, he's obviously, he was some kind of salesman, and the makeup that they put him in kind of indicates that he was buried alive, and some of the commentary that Juno makes like really kind of hits home that he died in that like late 50s, early 60s era, and he was just a really shitty person in life.
Right.
Which is why he is how he is in death.
Yeah, he has a like fast talking thing going on where he's clearly he didn't develop a taste for manipulating people after he died. That's how he was in life too. You know, he was a snake oil salesman.
Oh yeah. He was definitely a snake oil salesman. Half those watches that he was selling you did not work.
Right. They were mostly stolen.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you specifically as a makeup and arts and stage person, what did you think of the set design?
I absolutely loved the set design. My most of my background is actually in theatrical performances. So this movie was very reminiscent of stage performances and vaudeville, and it, again, I have said, it is very German expressionist. It is very theatrical. It's not supposed to take place in the real world. It has real performers, but it is a fantasy all of its own.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It feels like if someone were trying to in the 80s write a Grimm's fairy tale, this is what they would come up with.
Yes.
All right, Dorian, why do you love it so much? Why are you here tonight?
Well, because this movie is just it is just so fantastic, and here's why. It's a very simple plot, but it's so turned on its head. Normally, family goes into the house, and the ghosts are our villains. You know,
right.
They're the ones that we're trying to fight, and we're rooting for our poor family that's moved in. God, why would you do this? This was fun because it was so different in the sense that we're rooting for our ghosts. Because
when do you root for the poltergeist?
Right, in Beetlejuice you do. Because Alec Baldwin and Geena Davis are so wholesome and just a great couple that it's like, man, really killed by a dog? What the fuck?
I feel like that dog had a massive vendetta against them, because the first thing that he showed up,
dog checked to see if you were dead. That dog looked into the water like, did I get him? All right, go walk with me.
That's what you get for making a fucking model store in my town. We only want blackjack and hookers here.
Yeah, I want to see this. I want to see the movie, the spin-off movie that was about the dog and how he ran that town.
Exactly. And that to me is another one of the fun things about it, is that not a lot of movies tackle the afterlife and what it looks like. And it is so fun to see the afterlife as this very just by the numbers.
It's kind of a DMV.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, you know what? That kind of tracks. I feel that really hard. And so, for me, it was the whole movie is just iconic. I remember so many scenes from it, and for me, that's what makes a good movie. Is like, if I remember stuff from it and will continue to quote for the rest of my life from this movie or from the movie, I know that it was good. And again, the horror aesthetic, allowed kids to be able to watch a horror movie, not to the level that their older brothers and parents could, like, Nightmare on Elm Street or Friday the 13th or blah, blah, blah. But in such a way that, they can still get the creepy aspect of it. And there's some really terrifying, the Tim Burton stop motion that he's so much a fan of. That sets it apart from a lot of more kid-friendly horror movies. Case in point, one of the most horrible family made-for-kid horror movies ever. All of the people who are my friends who are watching, I hope you're ready because you knew it was coming. Fucking Hocus Pocus. Beetlejuice is a fun, it's you can take kids to see it. They might get a little freaked out, but and so forth. But at the same time, it was.
Tell them you're on a podcast. God damn it!
I'm turning the phone off. I'm sorry. I don't know why it's supposed to be. It was on silent, but I think it's attaching to the computer. I do apologize for that. Anyways, Hocus Pocus is just, it's bad. It's not entertaining. It's not fun. I barely remember anything from it except fucking Sarah Jessica Parker up in the sky singing this song that they would steal for Anastasia later. And it seems like she's also, much like the On Trial theme, trying to seduce us. And
Sarah Jessica Parker was horny on me in that entire fucking movie.
That's fair. But it also was a situation that where what Beetlejuice did was, sorry, I'm trying to get him to shut up. What Beetlejuice did was it made a storyline that was fun and crazy and memorable. Hocus Pocus never did that, and I think that's what sets Beetlejuice apart and why so many movies like Paranorman or Monster House and so on and so forth are so good, is because they did take that, what Beetlejuice did well, and take it fully home, and that's
okay. So I said at the beginning, because there's three of us here, I just wanted to talk tonight. I've done this before, like, when Pat and I did Josie and the Pussycats, we just talked. Though there is, with any review, I always deconstruct and pick things apart. And had it just been just myself and Chae or myself and Dorian tonight, I absolutely have my prosecuting arguments. There are some issues with this movie. Oh, yeah. My favorite criticism of this movie actually came. I just watched the honest trailer for it, and they were like, Beetlejuice, where the title character is only in the movie for 17 minutes.
Right.
It's a bit of a misnomer. This movie is not about Beetlejuice. He's barely the antagonist of this. The antagonists are I would say the antagonists are the Deets. It's what the hell's her name? It's Della Deets and Charles. They're the ones that, because this is about the house. That's this whole movie. What's funny to me about Beetlejuice is, I think, and you and I talked about this with Sleepy Hollow, how I said Tim Burton is a lot of style over substance. Mm-hmm. And I think that works for a lot of people. Like, they come to entertainment to be entertained. They're not looking necessarily to deconstruct and to take away some deep meaning. If it happens, great, but they're just as happy to have a, wonderful images on the screen and fun characters and performances, and that's a lot of Beetlejuice, and it gets away with that, which is fine. I don't take that away from the movie, but when you do start to examine it, and really scrutinize what's going on in this movie, this is about this couple's relationship to this house and what it means to them, and this is about preservation versus like recreation. Like Eddie is just bit about, like, we knocked down the building and we built a car park. They are very much like, we're willing to share this house with people that respect it. They clearly don't, and we can't get rid of them fast enough. That is the whole movie.
Oh yeah.
And in a different script where they figure this out and are able to drive the demons away. They are able to drive the Dietzes out of the house. You know, you don't need Beetlejuice anymore. He's like the last resort, like, well, are we going to press this atomic bomb? What else are we going to do? If we don't, we're going to lose to the Japanese. So
the Dietzes are now the Japanese.
Yeah, and Beetlejuice is the atomic bomb. Like, we don't really have a choice in anymore. That's kind of the whole thing. Like, 90% of this movie is Alec Baldwin and Gina Davis. Like, we love this house. Like, she talks about, like, right at the beginning of the movie, I wanted to stay in this house. I don't want to go anywhere. I don't want to go elsewhere on vacation. I just want to stay here and be a part of this thing. I mean, to the movie's credit, and there's a lot of good about this movie from just a filmcraft point of view, there is some efficient writing for the first act of this. We meet this couple. We like this couple. We spend some time with them. We spend some time with this house, which is like the star of this movie, more so than Michael Keaton is.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's in the movie more than he is. That's for damn sure. And then we meet the Dietzes, and it's like they're not wholly unlikable, but you get why. And it's one of the things I like about the script. You get why Gina Davis and Alec Baldwin don't like them, and why they're frustrated with this whole experience.
Catherine O'Hara is very unlikable in this movie. She's doing her job, but she's very unlikable.
Let me tell you how I love Catherine O'Hara in this, and her doing the Banana Boat song is still. I said it was like the best scene in the movie for me. It's the only scene in the movie I laughed hard at. Like, I can remember, I have memories of my dad who did not laugh a lot. He was a pretty serious kind of, what do you call it? Aspie kind of a guy. But when he laughed hard, and it was like a full-throated belly laugh, like his whole body would shake. And I can still remember my dad's first reaction to the Banana Boat song in that movie with the shrimp at the end, and him just full-throated vibration laughing. I can still feel it to this day. And every time I watch that scene, I think about that, which gives me one of my few happy memories. But I also still laugh at it. And I was watching it today so I would know what to talk about for the podcast. And Catherine O'Hara dancing around the table. I'm like, we had pulled into the driveway by that point, and so we were watching it in the car. And thank God, because I'm like dying laughing in the front seat watching this thing. The whole cast of characters around that table, all like really going for it and just letting the scene be funny. It's so good. But back to the only issues with this movie, like I said, is I don't know if there's enough story for 90 minutes. This thing's a little slight, and they definitely repeat a lot of the same beats throughout the second and third act. And the stuff about the marriage at the end came out of fucking nowhere, has no payoff other than I don't think they knew how to end the movie. Like, we need a big, it's like they wrote the ending and they're like, well, we need this to be bigger. We need this to be more impactful. Well, I don't know. How would we try to have him marry her? Okay, well, what's the implication of them being married? What does that accomplish? I don't know. Let's just do it.
I think they should have definitely put in at least a couple of comments about, like, Beetlejuice getting his green card to the living world or something like that in order to make the marriage scene make a little more sense.
Right.
But
if the marriage is so that he can come to the real world and then he can just be this giant agent of chaos, I needed to see the not the symptoms, but I needed to see the results of them. Because the whole thing is like, don't let out Beetlejuice. Don't let out Beetlejuice. Well, we're gonna let out Beetlejuice. Okay. Well, here's what happens if you wake up Godzilla. Here's what will happen. And then they wake up Godzilla. So now Godzilla has to destroy Tokyo. My second Japanese reference of the podcast. Like,
we're on a roll.
This is a weird show. Why does he keep doing that?
Godzilla was created because of the Japanese being upset about the nuclear attack about them. So you connected those two. The other thing in the story a lot of people don't remember about is kind of Lydia's arc of being the goth girl who's, doesn't want to be alive, either just because of what's been happening in her life, loss of her birth mom and such.
Which they do not talk nearly enough about.
They don't. And then obviously the Maitlands, Adam and Barbara, which is Alec Baldwin and Gina Davis, of course. Not being able to have a kid, and they've been trying, and they become surrogate parents to Lydia, and it becomes a defense of their child as well, even though surrogate child when they're about to be exorcised and they're still fighting, not so much for their own existence, but so this girl who they've come to love will not be married off to this demonic poltergeist, basically. And I think that really works. Again, I agree that the marriage thing, for the green card, especially with the whole DMV thing, could have been used and pushed better. And it was not. And that saddens me. But I think overall, for the audience, I think they were going for this worked. It's not Exorcist where it's like 2.5 hours. The last 30 will actually be the exorcism. But again, if you read the Exorcist book, a lot of it is their investigation on, is she possessed, or is she just mentally ill? What's happening here? But with Beetlejuice, it's what I call a fast track movie. We're here to do something. We're here to have fun. We don't necessarily need to dig into the deep end stuff. This isn't Gone with the Wind.
Well, let me raise an objection. It's on trial. I feel like, again, you're resting entirely on style, and that makes the movie a bit shallow.
It does.
And look, turn off the podcast. Me and you are and Chae are having a drink, and we're just talking about the movie. I probably don't say that. I probably go right along with the tenor of the conversation of, oh, isn't this movie fun? Here's the fun stuff about the movie. But anytime I start to scrutinize this thing, I'm like, all right, I'm gonna need a little more here than here's this sort of theme park attraction kind of a movie where we do some light scaring and we're done now. And I'm like, but what was it? What was this about? Well, the things that it were about were only barely touched on, and then we ran away from them so that we could do more. Blah, 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 blah,
Right. And what I would say is, I agree, and I think that issue came from the fact that the script was longer and much darker, and when they cut things out, some of the things that were lost were probably lost because they were in scenes that were too dark, and the writers, either because they felt their vision was being destroyed or didn't find a way to still have that in there correctly, it was lost. And so then Burton's still burgeoning style that we weren't used to yet, is really what grabbed people and made them enjoy this movie. Because again, if you ask anybody on the street, like, hey, here's $5, tell me the plot line of Beetlejuice, 20 words or less. It's like, well, these two people have a house and they die, and these people move into the house after they die, and they don't want them in there because they're ghosts, and so they hire this psychopath to get them out, and hijinks ensue.
Well, it also sounds very much like your neighbor's version of a feud that some other neighbors had.
Right. And it's like, this felt like another, it wasn't about ghosts, but it felt like The Burbs.
I was just thinking about that when Chae brought up the neighbor thing. I'm like, oh yeah, it's like The Burbs.
Just with ghosts and shit. But I would agree that this movie is very, very just stylistic. It's the same thing with like Christopher Nolan's Batman films. There's a lot going on, but it doesn't feel like a Batman movie. Like, again, coming back to Tim Burton, I remember a lot of people, like, Batman Returns is my favorite Batman movie of all time. I don't like The Dark Knight. Fight me. I don't care. Because Batman Returns feels like a Batman movie.
Hang on. Hot take. Batman Returns is the worst of the four, including Batman and Robin. Fight me.
On the next On Trial, or the new show we have to create, because I think they've already done it.
The duel.
The duel. It's Batman Returns versus Batman and Robin.
I will happily have that fight.
Oh yeah, no, let's do it. If you like that idea in the comments, folks, give us a thumbs up.
I've never wanted to hit Tim Burton more than having to sit through Batman and Robin, but that's not what we're here to discuss.
Right? No, but the thing,
Batman Returns.
Yeah. But I think Tim Burton would have rather been hit than watch it as well. So, you're probably in the same boat. But no, one of the issues that this has is that, like, The Dark Knight and even Dark Knight Rises. How do you try to remember?
Just keep going.
Sorry. Anyways, one of the issues is that, like, the Chris Nolan films all feel like Chris Nolan movies. They don't feel like
Yeah.
Batman movies. And I heard a lot of people say the same thing about Batman Returns. And Beetlejuice is definitely a Tim Burton movie.
Yes.
And you go to Tim Burton for the style and the artwork and, you know, the amazing effects they would do through stop motion. The stories there is in a very backwards way, where normally the set design and how it looks is the background to this great story. With a lot of Burton stuff, it's the other way around. And I think that's why we love it, is because we kind of get lost in this world. And even if we kind of get lost in the story a little bit, or like lost for what the story is, we have this amazingly beautiful world that we get to inhabit for 90 minutes. And that's what's fun about it.
You know, but this is why Robert and I yell and scream about James Cameron's Avatar.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's much the same argument. What a beautiful world this is. This is a movie people saw 2, 3, 10 times when it first came out, because they wanted to live in Pandora, because they wanted to escape this mortal coil, and that's why it made like $2 billion. Except that Avatar as a movie structure sucks. It's terrible. But it's like, I don't care. I'm not a movie person. I love the way it looks. I want to be those aliens, that sort of thing. And it's hard to reconcile those two things. So I want to throw this out there. Play a little game real quick. As we've been talking, and I was like, what director maybe could have gotten a hold of this instead in an alternate universe that would have given me more of what I wanted, bigger stakes, this movie to be about something, but keep the same aesthetic. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking Wes Craven.
Definitely.
And if you want to throw some ideas out there, the other one I thought of is if I can't get Wes Craven to do this, or Wes Craven turns it into a Nightmare on Elm Street Part 7, and I have to throw him from the building. My other thought was David Fincher. I think David Fincher maybe doesn't quite keep the light horror, childish aesthetic that it's got going on, but I think David Fincher would have given us a meatier product.
I think John Carpenter could have done the same, especially if you kind of looked at it approached it the same way he did The Thing.
Mm-hmm.
We definitely
might have done pretty well too, or whoever the fuck directed Baron Munchausen with Robin Williams.
I'd have to look that one up. What was the first one you said, Chae?
David Lynch. He's also known for a very strange style that's kind of similar to Tim Burton's.
Yeah, David Lynch would have had people walking out of the theater going, I don't understand. I don't know what I just saw. All right.
Yes, but it would have been studied for years and years afterwards, only to have David Lynch be like, it's a fucking movie. It is what you want it to be.
What do you think it means? I hate you, David Lynch. Just tell me what you're talking about. So wrapping up here, I think Michael Keaton gives a great performance in this. Very underused, because again, we're spending a lot of time with everybody else. But when he's on screen, he's a lot of fun. I kind of taking it all the way back to the beginning of the podcast. They make everything into a musical. There's a Spider-Man musical. There's a Rocky musical. So I'm not, not that long ago, I saw
Spider-Man musical is cursed.
I saw the Mean Girls musical.
That almost died.
Wow. Not that long ago, I saw Spam-A-Lot, which is a musical of the fucking Monty Python and the Holy Grail, for Christ's sake. So I'm not surprised they turn, they just kind of, there seems to be an interest in grabbing, an old IP and go, well, let's turn this into a musical and see what happens. And gosh darn it, people love musicals, as we know. So that element of it doesn't surprise me. There was I think it was in the Honest trailer and this came up when Ronnie and I were talking about Ghostbusters, about how stuff in the 80s was clearly meant for adults, but if kids watched it too, all the better. And if kids did watch it and it was a giant hit, especially with families, there was always a cartoon. And, so like there was like a Rambo cartoon and a RoboCop cartoon and obviously Ghostbusters. And as we're talking about tonight, there was a Beetlejuice cartoon. And, there's all these different ways without having to make more movies that you can keep this stuff relative in the culture and get a new fan base, to the point where I have 2 children, they're 10 and 13, and they love this thing. And they've been, at least my daughter has been looking forward to Beetlejuice all year. So that's my final thought on Beetlejuice 1988. you want to give your final thoughts here, Chae, and then Dorian?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Beetlejuice 1988 was a fantastic designer's wet dream.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful dark fairy tale set from the perspective of the ghosts.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a fantastic thing to show your kids if they start showing signs that they're a little bit creepy and they want to get into a little more spooky shit.
Yeah. It's a great light horror, children's horror kind of movie.
It is. It's a fantastic light horror. And honestly, it's got enough of a modern pacing that you don't have to bore the shit out of your kids with Universal monsters and I fucking love Universal monsters.
Mm-hmm.
That's the shit that I grew up on, but I understand that the pacing on it is a little weird for someone who is used to modern movies.
Yeah, with kids, if you don't get the star of the picture in the first act, you're gonna lose them. I'll tell you, that's why my taking this back to Star Wars, why my kids have struggled with A New Hope, because outside of that first, chase of the Carillion Corvette, nothing happens in the first act. Nothing until they kill Luke's parents. There's a lot of talking in that movie, because I can remember showing it to my kids and then both looking at me going, when does something happen in this movie? And I'm like, we're getting there. There's going to be a whole thing. I'm like, been 30 minutes. Like, oh my goodness.
Oh yeah, it's a very, very different pacing style.
Yeah.
And not a lot of people that grew up on 90s and 2000s movies will enjoy those older movies. But, I mean, this is paced really well for modern audiences.
Oh, yeah. If you have somebody born after 1995 and you would like to torture them because they were bad, show them The Deer Hunter. They'll apologize for whatever they did. All right. Take me home, baby doll, Dorian. Your final thoughts.
Again, I think this movie rests, strangely enough, even though he's only on screen for 17 minutes, with the title character of Michael Keaton's standout performance as Beetlejuice. This movie would also show Warner Brothers that Tim Burton had the ability and the style to direct Batman. This Batman was supposed to start filming in '87 with Burton at the helm. They shut it down because they didn't think he could do it. So he would take Beetlejuice instead, and they were like, hey, if it works, we'll think about it. And when Beetlejuice worked so well, they were like, fuck yes, let's do Batman. And so again, this movie is, yes, it's light on story. And again, I'd love to get my hands on the original script just to see, where it went. I haven't found what I can see as a approved copy of, like, yes, this was the original script. Here it is. They're never going to make it. So here you go. Online. But I think, again, the style of this movie does let it stand out. And the story and the characters are fun enough, and that everyone pulls their weight to make a light story, basically make a light sandwich feel filling like a full meal. And that's again why it stands out to me. And again, it's Michael Keaton at his most unhinged, having the time of his life, and again making this character so iconic that still to this day, every Halloween, after even 36 years, it is still a costume you can find at any costume store, and you will at least see one Beetlejuice if you're out and about doing Halloween, especially this year with the sequel coming out.